Well, you guys can't know this, but this is my fourth attempt at recording this. Each one gets shorter, and I'm not even going to try to make this one very long. I'm just going to give you what you need to know about the last three readings. The reading from the Quran is essentially an illustration of the properties, accepted properties of the hang on here, I'm gonna leave it alone. The accepted properties of the God of Abraham. That's the deity in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. At least each Christianity and Islam claim that they're worshiping the same God as the Jews. I'm not in a position to argue that one. You need to take a history of philosophy, history of religion class for that, or maybe a world religion class. You know who you are. But what you're getting here is the description of a God that is omnipotent, omniscient, and benevolent. And all three of these characteristics are seen as having a problem. And when you take the three characteristics all together, we arrive at something called the problem of evil. Well, let's take a look at each component. One, omnipotent. The question was raised by St. Thomas Aquinas. Can God create an object so large that God can't move it? Obviously, that would be a limit in either way you go. It's a limit in God's omnipotence. Now, Aquinas excuses this by saying that God is still omnipotent, just not capable of violating logic. And that doesn't sound like omnipotent to me. I'm sure it doesn't to you. If we then take a look at the next one, God's omniscience. Well, if God is omniscient, then in order to know something, it must be true. We know that from our studies in epistemology. In order for God to know the future, which God must know in order to be omniscient, then anything claimed about the future is already true. That is to say, it's either true or not true. So the future is already fixed in place. Therefore, we have no free will. Again, not a necessary problem, but one that is unattractive to a lot of people. And then the problem of benevolence. And this is the one you tie it to the other two, and you get the problem of evil. It's suggested that if God is omniscient and omnipotent and wants us to have the good things in the world, how can there be evil? For us to say that human beings introduce evil into the world is only to push the question one level back. How come God made human beings in such a way that they could bring evil into the world? Problem. It's usually answered by free will. We've already seen one problem with free will out of omniscience. But here's another problem, or another way to consider the problem. It could be that we had a world in which there were different good choices. All choices good, maybe not equally good, maybe on a scale, but where all choices were good choices and the evil choices weren't available. We would still have the freedom to choose between a variety of good choices, but we would not have evil in the world. And this is easily imaginable. I might post a story I've written about it on the website if I think of it. Okay. So that's the purpose for that first reading, to introduce this definition, this God that most people are comfortable with calling God, unlike the God of the philosophers, so very dissatisfying as there's no personality there. Not the God of the gaps. That means for pasting over what we don't know, and we just say, well, God does it. That doesn't hardly solve anything, but still. This whole issue is introduced here just to give a chance to understand these problems with the traditional monotheistic vision of God. Okay, now the second reading from Aurobindo exists to draw a contrast between traditional Euro-American, I like that better than Western, Euro-American pantheism and traditional Hinduism. I mean, and it's a really good point because what tends to happen in American or Euro-American thinking is that we write off the the unfamiliar religious traditions, and we just classify them in with some already existing tradition in our philosophical thinking or our religious thinking. And Aurobindo is quite right when he says there's much more to Hinduism than the barren, sterile pantheism of the West. Particularly in that the vision of pantheism usually discussed is a purely metaphysical concept. It doesn't seem to extend into anything really meaningful. The only exception I can come up with to that is American transcendentalism, but the transcendentalists have gotten this idea from Hinduism. And so insofar as their pantheism comes closer to Hinduism than the pantheism of, say, Baruch Spinoza, or I think you could call Henri Bergson a pantheist as well, is to say that if you copy Hinduism, you look more like Hinduism than if you don't. And what's so rich about Hinduism and its view of everything being God? Because that's what pantheism is. The claim is only one sort of stuff, and that one sort of stuff is God. Because the Hinduism doesn't just use this as a metaphysical underpinning that justifies certain logical needs or philosophical needs that have come out of a challenge against some prior doctrine of reality. Instead, it serves as a whole means for constructing a society, constructing a culture, constructing an ethics, constructing a vision of the relationships between components of the cosmos and other components of the cosmos, not merely human beings, but all things tied together with this view that everything is God. And that's important. I mean, it's a really much richer, much more fulfilling grasp of what's going on in Hinduism. I mean, again, you know, to take some of the familiar, from travel shows at least, images of people bathing in the Ganges. Well, they're mingling their godhood with the godhood of the river. They're trying to purify their somewhat human and tarnished godhood with the one of the pure godhood of the Ganges, and as such become more truly God, closer to God, perfectly God than they are normally. And that makes sense. You don't wonder why those people getting in that river looks dirty and filthy to me. Looks dirty and filthy to you, but to them, what they see is not the river as H2O filled with chemicals. What they see is God. And when you go to God, you can only come back pure. Just that easy. It explains an awful lot, I think. All right. So, Aurobindo. Now Zen Buddhism. The thing I want you to carry away from the reading on Zen Buddhism is this idea of enlightenment. Our author makes a case that all the traditional visions of afterlife, the traditional visions of how to live, these things are wrong, just wrong. That what we should be thinking about is this union with the cosmos, this insight into how everything is one. And this insight is what is enlightenment. Enlightenment is that moment of that flash, that ineffable flash. Ineffable means you can't describe it. It's not something that you can just sit down and go, well, here's what it's like. You can say it's sort of kind of like. You never get to say it's right out one thing or another because it's incapable of doing so. I mean, there are lots of things like this that we tend to think about. but the mystical experience, the experience of the direct experience of the divine, not the experience we have from our deductions or experience we have from lessons or teachers or whatever. The experience of the divine, direct, immediate, unparalleled. This blinding flash is what's meant by enlightenment in both Hinduism and Buddhism. For the Buddhist, it's found by practicing the Eightfold Path. It's by truly integrating the ideas that life is suffering, suffering is caused by desire, the way to ending desire is the Eightfold Path. Eightfold Path. Okay, so get that through your heads. And this is worth going over one more time. For the Buddhist, happiness is not pleasure. Happiness is not happiness is not happiness. Happiness is not the point. The point is equanimity, that we can face the world, and whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, we feel the same toward it. It's embracing this idea that we are in control of our attitudes, and that's about it in this world. So the way to deal with the world is to control our attitudes. And if we will learn to control them, if we will realize that it is not pleasure that brings happiness, pleasure just brings more desire. We want more of the pleasure we have. We want it longer. We want it more intense. We want to share that pleasure. We don't want to share pleasure. Pleasure is a distraction. Pleasure is not real. Pleasure isn't lasting. It does not bring about the kind of long-term contentment and happiness and peace that the end of pleasure, by the end of desire, that's what you need. And that's the goal of Buddhism. It's the goal of the Zen Buddhist, this practice of how can I clear my mind of all desire, of all wanting, of all passion, and all reason as well. This is not intended to be, Vulcan, whatever they call it. I used to know what they called it. I don't care, and you don't either. It's meant to be a clear, cold light that steers us away from the extremes into the middle way. Okay, so that's what we've got on religion. You should now be equipped for the test. Do use the study guide, do watch the videos. I think all told they only run about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. You should be able to ace this test. Thank you so much, and I'll look forward to the next set of lectures. Bye-bye.